Good afternoon and welcome, fellow councillors, officers and members of the public. It's lovely to see you here this afternoon. Welcome to South Kent Stevens District Council planning meeting on Wednesday the 13th of October. I am Councillor Helen Crawford and I will be chairing this meeting today. With me, as I have my Vice Chairman today, David Bellamy. I'm not aware of any fire drill taking place today, but if the fire alarm does sound, then please vacate the building via the stairs and the meeting place is in the front. Please can everyone ensure that their phones are turned off or to silent, thank you. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed via YouTube, so could you ensure that your microphones are turned off when not speaking. We have with us today Nicola McCoy-Brown, Director of Growth and Culture, Assistant Director of Planning Emma Whitaker, Principal Planning Officer Chris Brown and Special Projects Manager Phil Moore, and Senior Planning Officer Alan Murray, and Legal Services we have Matthew Stimpson today, and Democratic Services are being helped with Shelley and Alice. Public speakers, please be aware that you have 3 minutes to speak. You'll be advised when you have 30 seconds left. You may finish your sentence but not another paragraph. And can Councillor Bellamy now tell us who we have as public speakers, please? Thank you.
First application S20/2056. Parish councillors Dr. Margaret Palmer, Barnet Parish Council, Councillor Sean Ford, Stanford Town Council. Against, Deborah Hewson, Mrs. Susan Boyd, St Martin's Residents Group, and for the applicant, Mark Flood, but also alongside him, Andrew Rowland of Adams Architecture, and Tim Foxall of Glanville Consultants. And there's no speakers on the other applications.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we will start with the agenda and item 1, membership and apologies for absence. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Judy Smith, Councillor Rosemary Caby-Brown and Councillor Penny Milnes. Councillor Paul Wood will be substituting for Councillor Penny Milnes for this meeting only. I'll now do a register of attendance. Councillor Helen Crawford.
Present.
Councillor David Bellamy.
Present.
Councillor Harish Bishnal Singh.
Present.
Sorry. Councillor Phil Dilks.
Present, ma'am.
Councillor Charmaine Morgan. Councillor Robert Reid.
Present.
Councillor Penny Robbins.
Present.
Councillor Ian Selby.
Present.
Councillor Judy Stevens.
She's just stuck in traffic. She's en route.
Councillor Jackie Smith. Councillor Paul Wood.
Present.
Thank you very much for that. And now we will go to item 2, disclosures of interests. Does anybody have any disclosure of interests? And if you do think of something later on during the meeting, then please make us aware. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This is really for the avoidance of doubt. As you are well aware, I used to be the portfolio holder for planning. In the changes that our leader made, I took on the portfolio holding for property services. This was done with one particular exclusion. My leader, who I think is in the back of the room, kept St Martin's Park as part of his portfolio, and therefore I shall be taking in both the debate and the decision and the voting of this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Bisnursing.
Madam Chairman, declare any interest. I have been approached by members of the public in my ward. However, I come here with an open mind. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And Councillor Stevens, if you have any disclosure of interests for any of the items, please let us know. Lovely, thank you very much. And Councillor Jackie Smith, did you have something for item 6? Or item 5, is it?
Yes, I should declare an interest.
To the minutes of the meeting, item 3, minutes of the meeting. Is everybody happy with the accuracy of the meeting? I have 2 points to raise. One being that Councillor Bellamy left at 4:10 and that Councillor Bishnau Singh left at 4:35 on that meeting. So I'd like that noted in the minutes, please. Is everybody happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Could I have a proposer then, please? Thank you, Jackie Smith, and seconded by Councillor Judy Stevens. All those in favour, please. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And those against or abstentions? 2 abstentions. Thank you very much.
On the basis, Chairman, that I wasn't present.
Yeah, lovely. And same for you. Lovely. Thank you very much. So now we will go to item 4, application S20-2056, and being presented by Phil Moore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Phil Moore, Special Projects Manager here at SKDC. And I'm going to be giving you a short presentation. I also have my colleague here, Ben Hunt, who is the case officer. And between us, if members wish to ask any questions, we should be able to help you with an answer. Can I just ask somebody from IT to find out what's happening with the presentation? Oh, I think we're here. I think there must have been a time delay. Okay, so the proposal before you this afternoon involves demolition of a factory premises and redevelopment of the site with a mixed use comprising commercial development, up to 190 dwellings, and a retirement village and various other features which I'll describe to you in a later slide. And the site is north of Barnet Road in Stanford. So there's a number of key issues that I presented to you today in this presentation: principle of development, highways and traffic, design and the impact on the character of the area, impact on heritage assets, viability and affordable housing, impact on ecology, and this includes the impact on Barnet Hills and Holes, and other impacts. This plan shows the site location. If you can see my cursor on the screen there, that is the red line of the site. All the land that's outlined in blue is under the control of the applicant, primarily Burley. So this shows the site in its wider context. As you can see, it's on the southeast edge of Stanford, relatively close to the town centre, which is around about here. Also fairly close to Morrison's Supermarket, the new Aldi, and Stanford Hospital. Stanford Railway Station is also not too far away, where my cursor is pointing to now. South of the site, you have Burley House and Burley Park. And then to the north here, you have St Leonardos Priory, which is a scheduled ancient monument, as well as a listed building. We'll come on to heritage things slightly later on. This is a slightly more zoomed in satellite image of the site. On the western side, where it says SKDC, this part of the site is owned by the council and currently comprises the former Cummins generator manufacturing site. So it's basically covered with industrial buildings and hard standing. The field to the right, to the east, this is owned by Burley. It is a green field. However, it's not sort of virgin greenfield land as such. It does have an extant permission on it for commercial, office and light industrial use. Again, this one just shows the land ownership, with the purple being under the ownership of Burley and the brown being SKDC. So the development itself, a bit more of a detailed description. So it's a mixed use scheme. It has three main elements. First one being commercial, 10,000 square meters approximately of floor space. And that would be a mixture of offices and light industry. The second element is housing, what we might call conventional housing, of up to 190 new homes. The third key element is a retirement village, which would comprise around 150 units around a central facilities building, which will, as I understand it, is proposed to be available for public use as well. As well as those three elements, there's also local facilities, which would include a convenience store, a cafe, public open space, primarily around the eastern edge of the site, but also stretching around the south and north. And then there's some off-work sites along Barnet Road, which would improve cycle and pedestrian connectivity. In terms of the application type, well, this is an outline application. So we're considering the principle of development, but it does include matters of access. All of the matters, landscaping, scale, appearance, and layout, are reserved. In other words, they will be the subject of a reserved matters applications in the future. All the drawings that are submitted with the application, except for those detailed drawings of the access, are for illustrative purposes only. Now, this application is slightly unusual in that the council is both part applicant along with Burley, as well as the local planning authority. And it's important to recognise that the committee today is acting as the local planning authority, and the proposal must be looked at purely on its own merits and judged against all relevant planning policies. So this plan shows the site access. As I said, access is a matter that is included for consideration. The red arrows denote vehicular access. The blue arrows are pedestrian points of access, and the green are cycleways. So if you were to approve this today, those points of access will be fixed at this point, and there are detailed plans showing those points of access. This is the illustrative master plan. So I'll just briefly describe the various elements of the site. So at the western end, this kind of bluey grey colour denotes the commercial element, offices and light industry. The black rectangle here is the only building that would be retained on site. Now, this is the oldest part of the old Cummings site. We call it the 1904 building, built in 1904. It does have some historical interest. It's not listed or anything like that, but it, subject to renovation, it's quite an impressive structure in relation to what the rest of the site. The sort of orangey brown section in the middle, that denotes the retirement village, with a sort of central hub in the middle there with community facilities surrounded by smaller collections of dwellings or units for retired people. The grey colour just here, and also smaller parcels just here, that's your conventional residential development. And the sort of purpley coloured bits here and here, that's a mixture of shop, cafe and potentially residential uses above. Here we have some illustrative street elevations. Again, I would stress this is not set in stone. This is just to illustrate how it may appear. This is the elevation along Barnet Road, existing terrace houses at the top there. And then this is the 1904 building. This is what it would look like if it was exposed. Currently, you can't see it from the road. And then you've got a mixture of commercial and dwellings along the rest of the road frontage. This shows a fairly traditional design, taking cues from architecture in Stanford. But again, I will stress this is not set in stone. All of the detailed stuff will be dealt with at reserve matter stage. So a number of parameters plans have been submitted with this application. And you will have noticed in the report there are conditions which tie any future reserve matters to the parameters plans to ensure that what comes in at reserve matters stage is not something completely different than what's envisaged here. The blue is the commercial, the yellow is the residential, the greeny bit around the edge, that's your landscape. And then the purple stars, convenience store, shop, etc. Another one of the parameters plans, this involves building heights, which ranges from 2-story, 2.5-story, in other words, 2 stories to eaves height, and then dormer windows in the roof, and 3 stories. The 3-story bits are the dark blue areas, which are sort of focal points within the site. Again, condition with tying any reserve matters to this parameter. Just quickly through some photographs, you'll all be familiar with the site. Members carried out a site visit earlier this week. This is the 1904 building. This picture doesn't really do it justice. At the moment, it's got windows boarded up and this roller shutter and various other modern add-ons. But if all that was taken away, it is quite an interesting building, which does have some historic merit. This is looking from Edgar Gardens on the western side of the site. This is where there would be a pedestrian access. Again, the 1904 building behind. Some views from Barnet Road. This is one of the entrances into the site. You can see the general appearance of the industrial buildings within the site. And that's the former main entrance to the Cummings factory. Looking along Barnet Road to the east, the greenfield part of the site is beyond this hedgerow. At the moment, there is a quite strong row of trees or avenue of trees along that side, which will be reinforced. This is looking the opposite direction to the west along Barnet Road. You can see the office building, which is part of the Cummings factory, which is no longer fit for purpose as office buildings. That would be removed as part of this development and replaced with something much more in keeping. Again, through that gap, you can see the current factory buildings. Nearly getting to the end of the photos. This is looking across the current greenfield part of the site towards the Cummings factory, looking westward. You can see it's not a particularly nice looking building on the entrance to Stanford. All of that would go and be replaced by something much more sympathetic. You can just see one of the spires of Stanford there on the horizon. Obviously, the setting of that spire is not as good as it could be at the moment with these buildings, and will be definitely improved by this scheme. Last photo, this is looking from Priory Road. On the left of the picture, you can see St Leonardos Priory, which is a Grade 1 listed building, and the whole of this site is a scheduled ancient monument. It's very important in heritage terms. In the background, currently, you can see the not very nice factory buildings. Again, a massive improvement to the setting of that building. So in terms of our evaluation, first of all, the principle of development. I mentioned earlier that there's an extant permission on the eastern side of the site, this area here, the Burley land, which is currently a field. What you see in this picture is what currently has permission, the authorised uses of the site, which could be implemented at any time. The Cummings factory could go back to being a factory, an open industrial use of any kind, and the business park, if you like, on the eastern side could be built out at any time. That's the current situation in planning terms. Site is covered by various local plan policies. Including E4 and E6. E4 is protection of existing employment sites. E6 deals with the loss of employment land to non-employment uses. That's designed obviously to protect employment sites from inappropriate other development that would result in job losses, etc. There are some criteria within those policies that allow for redevelopment under certain circumstances. And in this case, there's some examples there. Current buildings are vacant and no longer appropriate. It would result in the creation of similar employment opportunities on the site, and there'll be wider regeneration benefits. So the boxes for that policy are ticked. So it is acceptable for part of the site to become non-employment and the rest of it to remain as employment in policy terms. And just to ensure that the commercial element happens and we don't end up with a scenario where the resi is built out and nothing more than that, there are conditions requiring phasing to ensure that the commercial element is delivered in a timely manner. Further points on the principle of development. So the development does support the role of Stanford as a market town, which is in accordance with the local plan. It's a sustainable site, partly brownfield on the edge of a settlement, fairly close to Stanford Town Centre. There will be wider regeneration and economic benefits of the development, with potentially up to 825 jobs to be created, and that includes jobs within the retirement village, shops, etc., as well as the commercial development. It's been demonstrated that there's no adverse impact on the town centre viability or vitality either. Just going to mention Stanford Neighbourhood Plan. Currently has limited weight. It has reached the stage of examination, but it hasn't gone through to adoption yet, and there are some issues that need resolving. It does have some weight, but it's limited. But there is no fundamental conflict with any of the policies within that neighbourhood plan. Highways, as you would expect, we've had some objection to the development on highway grounds. It is a sustainable location, well connected to the town centre. And the key thing to note here is that this development would result in a net reduction in traffic compared to existing authorised uses. What could happen under the extant permission, or should Cummins factory come back to use. And that's been demonstrated in a thorough transport assessment, which the Highways Authority have fully assessed, and they raise no objections. Furthermore, this development would result in improvements to bus facilities, bus shelters, etc., better cycle and pedestrian routes, and an upgrade to the railway crossing. Next part of our evaluation: design and impact on the character of the area. Going back a couple of years, the proposal went through a design review process, which is carried out by Open, now known as Design Midlands. They're the regional design review panel. They made various recommendations, which have more or less been carried out in what's in front of you now. It also scores very well on the Building for a Healthy Life assessment, which is a government-endorsed way of checking whether something is good design or otherwise. And particularly for an outline application, our design officer is content that it does score well on that test. Site has very good connectivity, extensive landscaping, particularly around the eastern side, which would enhance the gateway to Stanford, which currently doesn't look very good. There will be conditions that require any reserve matters application, as I said before, to comply with those parameters plans, as well as a design code which has been submitted with the application. So there is some certainty there that what you'll get at reserve matters stage will be of a satisfactory quality. Onto heritage. This is a very important issue. As you can see from the plan there, where my cursor is now, that's the site. Immediately to the south, you have Grade 1 listed Burley Park. and Grade 1 listed Burley House itself, various other heritage assets within the grounds. To the north, you've got St Leonardos Priory, Grade 1 listed, scheduled ancient monument. And then this sort of purpley area is Stanford Conservation Area, fairly close to the site. Impact on the conservation area is primarily to do with views towards the town, towards the conservation area, which has, you might say, an iconic skyline with the numerous historic buildings in it. So overall, having consulted Historic England, our own conservation officer, our archaeological consultants, etc., the consensus is that there would be a positive enhancement to the settings of all of these heritage assets. So in heritage terms, the development is acceptable. Viability and affordable housing. A viability assessment has been submitted with the application, and this is accords with what our local plan policy says. It's been robustly tested by our own expert, and the conclusion, both of the consultancy who did the viability assessment and our own consultant, our own expert, is that technically the site's not viable with any affordable housing on it. However, the applicant is taking a longer term view of this and is still proposing 30% of the conventional housing to be affordable, which will be secured by the Section 106. And that is a positive benefit of this development. It's also a corporate priority of the council, provision of affordable housing. So that should be viewed as a benefit. Ecological impacts. The site itself currently doesn't have very much ecological value, being largely hard standing on buildings on the western side and intensively cultivated land on the eastern side, although obviously there are some hedges and trees, but overall it's low ecological value at the moment. So the development with extensive landscaping would result in a net biodiversity gain. There is some off-site impact, particularly on Barnock Hills and Holes. Barnock Hills and Holes is a site of special scientific interest. It's also, Ben, remind me what NNR means? National Nature Reserve, and SAC, which is Special Area of Conservation, which is a very high level designation, internationally important site. Now, in order to ensure that there's no adverse effect on Barnock Hills and Holes, the council has undertaken habitats regulations assessment, which has resulted in, it basically says, in order to make this development acceptable, various mitigation has to be put in place via the Section 106. And appropriate mitigation has been approved by Natural England, which will ensure there is no adverse impact on the integrity of the hills and holes. And I'm just going to show you a plan now which shows you where the hills and holes are in relation to Stanford. So the green blob there is the hills and holes at Barnock. It's about 2.5 miles away from Stanford itself, or from the site itself, which is the red blob. Mitigation measures approved by Natural England include dedication of what is currently a permissive footpath to be a permanent footpath. Also, the piece of land immediately to the north of the site, which is currently has permissive access, to be made publicly accessible in perpetuity. Other mitigation measures include a financial contribution towards a warden for Barnock Hills and Holes, and various other measures that will ensure that there's no adverse impact. So I'm getting close to the end now. Other impacts, other environmental impacts, including contamination, flood risk, noise, air quality, have all been assessed. We've had various multiple reports submitted with the application, which have all been assessed by our own officers and consultants. All of these impacts are acceptable subject to mitigation. Policy SB1, which you'll be familiar with in the local plan, this is all to do with sustainability measures. The condition will be attached to ensure that those measures are implemented at the reserve matter stage. Section 106 will ensure adequate infrastructure is put in place. It's often one of the objections that we get, that new houses, you get new houses, but people can't get appointments with doctors and things like that. Well, there's a Section 106 package here which will ensure money towards health upgrades, education, upgrade to the railway crossing, also the ecological mitigation that I mentioned, as well as the affordable housing. So finally, the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions under Section 106, including the additional Section 106 heads of terms, which is in the additional items report. That's the monitoring fee. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was a very good presentation. And I do apologise, Ben, I forgot to introduce you, as you'll be helping Phil answer questions. I will go now to the public speakers. So if we could have our first public speaker, please. That's Dr. Margaret Palmer from Barnet Parish Council. If you'd like to come up there. Thank you very much.
That one. Thank you.
Speak when you're ready. Thank you.
Well, I'm speaking on behalf of Barnet Parish Council, who have an objection to the proposal. Next slide, please. The Hills and Holes is, as has been pointed out, a multiply designated site, very important. It's a lovely place for a picnic, but in a way it's been loved too much. Next slide, please. Natural England has pointed out that, in fact, it is showing signs of degradation due to overuse, especially due to the number of high number of dogs that use the site. And they do enrich the site, and they also, of course, sometimes worry the sheep that are on the site, which is very distressing. And it's been suggested by Natural England that in order to make this any better, this situation better, more provision of access to public use for the recreational area, recreation demands on the site are reduced. Next slide, please. Now, the site is within us, has been pointed out, 5 kilometres of the development site. And so a habitats regulation assessment has been required, and it includes ameliorative measures that are put forward to try to solve this problem. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, there are various mitigation measures proposed, as it has been suggested already, but the important part from our point of view is the public access, which is available in Burley Park and also along the southern side of the River Welland. Next slide, please. Now, the point about this is that Burley Park and these other sites have already been accessible for many years to the public, especially Burley Park. And so this really isn't making the situation any better. The situation is bad despite those areas being accessible. The visitor carrying capacity of Barnet Hills and Holes is already exceeded. Next slide, please. So we think that these mitigation measures are not going to be affected. There's a huge number of people in comparison with the population of the village, which will be at its doorstep and ready to use the site for recreation. And we believe that more areas of recreation will have to be put forward in order to allow any improvement in the site.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to turn your microphone off, thank you. And we'll have our next speaker, Councillor Sean Ford from Stanford Town Council. Thank you. Lovely, thank you. Speak when you're ready.
My name is Sean Ford and I'm the planning chair at Stanford Town Council. Stanford Town Council has voted in support of the St Martin's Park outline application. However, we'd like to make the following recommendations. 1, vehicles entering and leaving the site will increase traffic volume on Barnet Road. Many St Martin's Park occupants will need to travel by car to schools and shops via the High Street St Martin's Junction, the Water Street Junction and the Town Bridge, all recognised bottlenecks. To assist traffic flow, mini roundabouts or sequenced traffic lights would need to be placed at these junctions. 2, there is a dangerous unmanned railway crossing next to the site. We believe the only way to make the crossing safe is to seal off any access to the tracks and construct a pedestrian bridge over the railway line. This route will be a major pathway into town for people wishing to access shops and schools on foot, and the cost of a robust solution is more than justified. 3, the proposed development will seriously impact existing infrastructure, i.e. schools and healthcare provision, which are already stretched. As outlined in the local plan, approval should only be granted if it can be demonstrated that sufficient infrastructure capacity will be provided to meet the requirements of the proposed development. 4, it is stated that the development will meet the local plan policy H2 provision that 30% of the scheme's total capacity be affordable housing. At the moment, however, there seems to be no definite confirmation of this provision and no details of where it will be situated. 5, there is less than a month until the world leaders gather in Glasgow for the COP26 meeting. Globally, buildings consume over a third of the energy produced and are responsible for 40% of energy-related carbon emissions. New buildings must go through a radical change to meet net zero targets and mitigate the climate crisis. Improved efficiency is critical. It is far more cost efficient to save energy than to generate it. St Martin's Park could bring housing to Stanford that slashes energy demand and ensures healthy, eco-friendly environments for living. The costs of building to a specification that achieves these aims are not prohibitive, and getting design right from the outset is vastly cheaper than retrofitting later. St Martin's Park could and should be a landmark eco-sustainable development, not one of the many that makes a token gesture of eco-compliance, but one that embodies the climate change aspirations of SKDC and its leader. Last month, Kellum Cook wrote in the Stanford Mercury, "Climate change is an issue I'm personally passionate about. It poses an undeniable threat to our future. It's a global issue, and every individual business, council, and community must play its part. SKDC has declared a climate emergency to put the issue at the centre of our agenda and set out the changes we must make to reduce our environmental impact. Stanford Town Council believes St Martin's Park could and should be a testament to this."
Thank you very much indeed. And we'll have our next speaker, thank you, who is against, Deborah Hewson. Thank you. Yeah, if you could just put your microphone on, then we can get started. If you'd like to take a seat, thank you.
SKDC as the planning authority is. Oh, yeah. Right, shall I? Right, SKDC as the planning authority is permitted to give itself permission to develop, and I could quote, providing the application receives rigorous examination. Part of that rigorous examination is public consultation. The proposed development was considered of sufficient importance to plan a public meeting in March 2020, but this was cancelled due to COVID. Nothing has been rearranged. It is evident that public concerns have not been sufficiently canvassed or represented. A pre-planning meeting held by Stanford Town Council was criticised by its own councillors before the planning meeting as not giving the chance to take in comments from the public and other councillors, leading to predetermination, which is not correct procedure. This application was due to be heard on Wednesday the 17th of March. Due to the protocols in place at the time, we were asked to submit objections 48 hours in advance. Shortly after we did so, we were advised that the item had been withdrawn from the agenda. Given the sensitivities of the council being both applicant and approver, this felt akin to the defence giving their arguments to the prosecution. We believe we raised some valid points. The applicants, Burley Land Limited and SKDC, with teams of professional planners and legal experts, have subsequently had 6 months to respond and refine their application. In contrast, we were notified on Friday that the application had been added to the agenda for today. Our concerns remain. The planning application is often referred to as the development of the former Cummings factory site, but it is that site with the addition of adjoining fields offered by Burley. The additional land is currently classed as employment provision, but has rather opportunely been added to the commercial redevelopment of the Cummings site under the guise of mixed development. We believe this is a substantial change of planning law. Stanford Neighbourhood Plan, now in its final stages of approval, identified housing development to the north of the town where there is more supporting infrastructure, reflecting the preferences expressed in the consultation process. The application land is in the south. Why should these requirements change when considered expedient? Land is allocated to the north of Stanford for over 2,100 houses. Up to 600 homes have been built, plus other developments are completed or planned. The case officer states that the council can demonstrate a supply of housing land sufficient to meet need over the next 5 years, describing this development as a beneficial windfall. The additional land more than doubles the size of the site to include 190 houses plus a retirement village as stated of 150 homes. The scale of this supplementary development will have a considerable impact on local residents, traffic flow within Stanford, and seriously compromise the already infrastructure and services. The combination of the two sites has been presented as a done deal. One would not exist without the other. Yet no compelling reasons have been presented by the applicants as to why this additional land.
Thank you. And when I say 3 minutes, I do mean 3 minutes. Thank you. And can I have the next person speaking, Mrs. Susan Boyd of St Martin's Residents Group? Thank you. Start when you're ready, thank you.
I'm presenting today on behalf of Sue Baxter, who's unable to be here. One of the key objections is the scale of the St Martin's Park development and the impact that this will have on the volume of traffic south of the town bridge in Stanford. It'll lead to further congestion, obviously, on all the roads leading into High Street St Martin's and vehicles using adjacent residential roads as rat runs. Not to mention the exacerbation of existing parking issues, which any visitor to Stanford will tell you are already out of control. Whilst the SKDC report acknowledges some of these concerns, it concludes that they are not valid since their traffic survey shows that there will be a net reduction in traffic. I'm afraid there are serious issues with the way these figures have been calculated. The baseline upon which the traffic survey is based is deeply flawed. The nature of the proposed development with its new residential component is fundamentally different to the original proposal. Since the original planning approval in 2004, there's been a significant increase in traffic in the town. And also we believe the traffic survey was conducted during lockdown, which is not what you would call ideal. In the report, Peterborough City Council actually says it's of the opinion that vehicle movements have been underestimated. In addition, what we have to remember about this development is all the key amenities in Stanford lie north of the river, and whatever good intentions the developers claim with regard to encouraging walking and cycling, we all know the reality that people are going to hop into their cars. And what you've got to remember is that the only way into the town centre is down Barnock Road and onto High Street St Martin's. It's the only route. People aren't going to be driving around via Peterborough and coming in through the A1. So it is completely disingenuous to say that it's going to reduce traffic. It's clearly going to increase traffic. It doesn't take a genius to make a conservative estimate of the number of extra journeys involved. We've already heard that there are proposed 825 jobs at the site. You might be interested to know that that's actually 200 more than were employed at Cummins when the factory was open. Including return journeys, it's 600 weekday journeys at least, plus 190 houses, many with 2 cars. You don't, again, have to be a genius. That could easily add up to 500 journeys to work, shop or ferry children. The retirement village, 150 homes. Just one trip out daily would amount to 300 journeys. So it's not alarmist to project an additional 1,800 journeys per day from vehicles accessing an already congested area. No one's arguing against the redevelopment of the Cummins site. It's the Greenfield site development that is opposed.
Thank you very much. And our final speaker is the applicant, Mark Flood. If you'd like to come along, please. Thank you. And if you'd like to bring your associates with you, so when we ask you questions, you can have somebody there to help you answer. If you'd like to start when you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'm the agent for this outline application. I'm accompanied by our Highways Advisor, Tim Foxall of Landville Consultants on my left, and Andrew Rowland of Adam Architecture, who developed the master plan for the site on my right. I'd like to briefly share with you our vision for St Martin's Park. St Martin's Park will both respect and reflect the best aspects of Stanford's special character as one of the most beautiful and important historic market towns in England, through the creation of a new mixed-use community. Along Barnock Road, there'll be a new avenue of parkland trees, a significant new landscape feature to help balance a nationally significant Burley Park opposite, part of a pleasant and appropriate new transition from town to country and vice versa. Existing points of access will be used, as you've heard, creating a safe, characterful and permeable network with a well-defined hierarchy of streets designed to promote walking and cycling over vehicles. At the western end of the site, there'll be a high-quality commercial area with a variety of unit types and sizes, a new neighbourhood store and a separate cafe, boosting facilities for all on the southern side of the river. In the middle of the site will be a retirement village with a range of facilities available to all. At the eastern end, there'll be housing of different types, sizes and tenures, including affordable housing. Next slide, please. The new streets, buildings, roofscape and materials will all feel both familiar and appropriate, reinforcing Stanford's special identity. A placemaking design code underpins the application. Next slide, please. The eastern boundary will be defined by a crescent of detached and semi-detached villas, so forming an elegant and permanent eastern edge to this area of the town. Next slide, please. And again, The site is well placed to benefit from existing rights of way and open spaces, but various enhancements are proposed as discussed and agreed with your officers and with statutory consultees. Next slide, please. This application has been through independent design review, PAD, and is policy compliant. The frontage to Barnack Road shown here is just one example of the visual enhancements the development will generate. Workspace will be provided for up to 825 new jobs, and there'll be further economic benefits as summarised in the officer report. The mix of new homes will reflect local need. To conclude, St Martin's Park will make a positive contribution to Stanford, and we hope very much you'll be able to support it today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to questions to the applicant, please. Do I have any? No, sorry, not the public speakers. It's just the committee. Yeah, Councillor Paulwood, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. One of my initial questions is Stanford Town Council will support the application, but raised quite a few queries on highway grounds. I just wonder, have you had meetings with Stanford Town Council to address their issues, and have you be able to address their issues or not?
Thank you. Two parts to that question. One is communication, and the other is what we've done in terms of the issues raised. So I'll deal with the first one. There was reference earlier to public consultation being curtailed by the pandemic. In terms of an exhibition as an event that all could attend, including town councillors, that's true. And of course, that was nobody's fault. But we embarked upon a series of publicity, online stakeholder consultations, including the town council. Your colleague to your left attended one of them, I seem to recall. So the engagement was done on that basis, including with the town council itself, and the issues that have been raised in the town by the town council speaker, I recall, were discussed at some length during that exercise. I'll perhaps turn to Mr. Foxall just to comment on the traffic issue, because that seems to be the main one being raised.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, committee. Of the public speakers that you've heard from this afternoon, two have spoken quite eloquently around their concerns in respect of highway impacts, and as the highway consultant acting on behalf of the applicants, I can fully appreciate that. The concern seems to be the presumption that this development will give rise to an increase in vehicular traffic along Barnack Road and impacting upon local junctions. Fundamental to understanding the transport case here is an appreciation of the fallback position, which your officers have also very eloquently expressed this afternoon, in so much as when one takes what I refer to as the fallback position, being the reoccupation of the former Cummins factory site and the build out of the already lawfully implemented commercial development on Burley Land's site, you end up with a net reduction when comparing the volume of traffic that those two developments could generate versus what our proposal will generate. So this suggestion that there will be an increase in traffic is not true, and it isn't, as Mrs. Boyd suggested, a disingenuous statement. Indeed, I noted that Mrs. Boyd doesn't oppose the redevelopment of the Cummings site, presumably therefore accepting that that could generate traffic against which our development could be netted off. The same then must be taken for the currently undeveloped Burley Land, which could equally be developed tomorrow and have a highway impact unopposed, as it already benefits from a lawfully implemented permission. I hope that helps to clarify matters.
Thank you. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Through yourself, the Chair. Question is, when was the traffic survey conducted? Was it conducted during lockdown? Thank you. Just clarify that one, please.
We did undertake one traffic survey, and it was indeed during lockdown, but it's very important to understand what the purpose of that traffic survey was. It was not for the purposes of assessing the traffic impact of this development. It was undertaken as a result of feedback we received through the public consultation exercise, where we were asked to examine the feasibility of the reduction of the speed limit along Barnack Road. So we undertook speed surveys that actually, during a period of lockdown, may well have given rise to a higher speed, given lower traffic flows than they would had it been undertaken outside of lockdown period. That data was passed to the incumbent highway authority for assessment in the context of that reduction in speed limit only, not in the context of assessing the traffic impact.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bisnassi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very concerned with regard to the traffic survey. And also, I think this development will generate more traffic for the simple reason, because all our schools, the primary schools, the secondary schools, the nurseries, which we have got two of them in the town centre and three of them in the north side, they will all attract traffic on that. If you really wanted to understand how many people that use a car to take the children to either nursery school or to the primary school, you should have gonna have a study at Foundry Road to find how many parents do use that. And I think the same thing is going to happen here in Barnack Road. So did you make a study of that? Or the accessibility, the amount of people that will be from there will accessing all the three main institutions of educations, during the daytime, morning and afternoon?
Thank you. The transport assessment that was submitted with the planning application did undertake a full multimodal trip assessment. So that's looking at pedestrian, cycle, public transport trips, as well as just vehicle trips. So yes, we have looked at that. And as a result of that and further conversations with your incumbent highway officers, we are proposing improvements along Barnack Road in the form of enhanced pedestrian and cycle connectivity, which is obviously a material enhancement over the existing situation and indeed over the situation that could prevail if those two current permissions were implemented that I talked about earlier.
Can I come back again, Madam Chairman, secondary?
Just wait, I just want to see if there's anybody else who has any questions and then I'll come back to you. Anybody else have any questions that hasn't already asked? Councillor Stevens?
Yes, there's a couple of things. One of them relates to highways, actually, and you talked about speed reduction and the survey that you did during the pandemic being related to speed. Are you going to put any mitigation in against speed along Barnack Road? Is that foreseen?
The development doesn't propose to reduce the speed limit, principally because the delivery of the development is not contingent upon a reduction in the speed limit. We can get adequate visibility from the site accesses to meet the existing current speed of traffic. Notwithstanding, the applicants would fully support a reduction in speed limit if the highway authority were to pursue that.
Thank you.
There's some more questions, if that's okay.
Well, I'll just get everybody else to speak first because you've already asked one question. So I just want to make sure everybody's got a fair. Anybody else? We'll go back to Parish and then come back to you then.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What I was in your studies, did you actually study due to increase, especially those three sections that I said, apart from taking the health issue, people will be accessing all the health also situated, the doctor's surgeries, the dentist, the hospital is on the north side of it. People will be more inclined to jump in their car to access those. What will be impact on the junctions of Barnack Road and St. Martin's junctions, and also from Water Street onto the main road by the bridge?
So for the reasons I've already set out, because the assessment that we've undertaken clearly demonstrates that overall this development gives rise to a net reduction in vehicle traffic when compared to that fallback position, there's no requirement to undertake detailed junction modelling assessments. And that is a position that was agreed by your highway authority officers.
Thank you. And Councillor Stevens again.
Thanks very much. One was just relating to the sustainability that was raised by Stanford Town Council. I don't know whether that is appropriate at this stage in the proceedings, but obviously, were you the consultancy, Adam were you involved in Edgar Crescent? Is it Edgar Crescent just up from there, Edgar Gardens? No, okay. But anyway, is there anything, obviously this is an opportunity, isn't it? To make the development sustainable. First of all, what are the plans to do that? And the other was going to ask was relating, obviously there are concerns about Barnock Hills and Hollows and overuse. So I don't think that concern should be taken lightly. I don't know whether, obviously you have made some mitigations against that in terms of the plans that you've put forward, but I don't know if there's anything, I just want to raise that really with you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. If I kick off on that, because there are a couple of different questions in there. Firstly, in terms of sort of sustainable construction and all related matters, I can certainly say hand on heart that when I first became involved in the scheme, a key part of the instruction to me and to the project team was to make sure that, you know, to put it bluntly, we nailed that particular aspect. And part of the project team included a very experienced sustainability and energy efficiency consultant who produced a report that forms part of the application. And there's a section in the report before you that lists, so to speak, the headline points from that report. Broadly speaking, the intention is that the scheme will go beyond building regulations requirements in terms of energy efficiency. I can't sit here and say to you exactly what will be put in to achieve that, for the simple reason that's a matter of detailed design, and we're not there yet. But there's a condition recommended to you which requires the Reserve Matters scheme to effectively broadly accord with the work we did on that. So we have done work on that, been alive to it from day one. On Barnock Hills and Holes, I'll put this quite simply, really. The applicant's done a lot of work in discussion with your officers, who have been very constructive, and with Natural England directly, to address the matter and to formulate a package of mitigation. Now, I understand not everybody agrees that package of mitigation does the job, but the fundamental point I'd emphasise is that Natural England, as your key statutory consultee, and indeed the Wildlife Trust on the Cambridgeshire side of the border, are content with it. And in fact, the on-site management mitigation measures at Barnock Hills are those which Natural England themselves put forward. We didn't come up with those. And Natural England are the people who manage that site. So I'm not an ecologist, I'm not an expert on habitats. So I'm, as your officers do, and I'm sure this committee normally will rely on the view Natural England are taking. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just add a little bit about the sustainability. So in terms of the sustainability, obviously, I think the question is probably directed towards the specific sustainability of the dwellings themselves. But I think there's a lot in the master plan, which is also about what we would call soft sustainability. So ensuring that the neighbourhoods are walkable, you have pedestrian and cycle access to the centre and the facilities that are there. We're providing facilities on site, so it's a mixed-use development essentially. There's human scale. There's natural surveillance from the properties, so the concept of the master plan itself is sustainable, quite apart from the specific building design.
Lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Selby.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. Through yourself again. The development is, as the crow flies, not far from the town centre, and as it's been mentioned, it's not far from the Morrison superstore as well. It's also been mentioned in the presentation about the cycleways and the walking facilities. Can you tell me, please, access across that railway, where do the pedestrians and the cyclists have to go if they wish to go to, say, Morrison's or the town centre? Do they actually have to come all the way down to the High Street Road, or could you just explain if there's any access over the railway, please? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. It might be helpful to put up one of the slides in my presentation, which I think was the penultimate one, showing some linkages. I don't know if that's possible. The one with the green shading on it, just before that one. That's it. So it's not very easy to see, at least from here anyway. I hope you can see it a bit better than I can. But so we're all familiar with where the site is. The current situation is that there is an unmade bridleway which runs from Barnack Road up the eastern edge of, I'll call it the Burley Field for shorthand, and gets to the railway, and there's a completely uncontrolled, albeit gated, crossing of the railway at that point. Not particularly conducive to use, particularly by those who are, perhaps impaired or less mobile than some of us, or mothers with pushchairs, or anybody in that sort of situation. If you've successfully dealt with that, you then you cross the railway line, and then you walk up a path which again in places is unmade, through the meadow, up towards where there's an existing development just nearing completion, around the corner where that cursor is now, thank you, and then up to Uffington Road. Now that's not an easily passable route in the sense of the surfacing and the railway crossing. So it's important to bear in mind what's going to happen to that route through the 106 obligations that are in front of you. So the first thing to say, and I'll take the same sort of process. So from Barnack Road, and this is at the request of county rights of way officers, the existing unmade track would be resurfaced so that it's far more usable. And then as you go along that eastern edge of the current field, there will be a series of pedestrian and cycle access points informally into the open space forming part of the development. Okay, so you wouldn't have to go down onto Barnack Road and up again if you live within the scheme. You could go sort of straight on to the resurfaced bridleway at one of those points. So you then reach the railway crossing, which is going to be upgraded with what's called a meerkat crossing by Network Rail. And that's actually something they're putting in, or they've got a programme plan to put in at a number of locations along this particular line. But this one's being accelerated. And effectively, in simple terms, as I understand it, it's the railway equivalent of a pelican crossing, but of course the trains don't stop. But there's an advance warning, so somebody can operate it and they know with certainty whether there's a train within the vicinity. So it's taking the sort of the human error element out of it for those crossing. So you go across there. Up through the meadow, again, the track there would be upgraded in terms of its surfacing. You go over a bridge that's recently been renovated over the river, and then you reach another timber bridge, and that timber bridge through the 106 is to be upgraded at County Council request. And then again, continuing up towards Uffington Road, you've got resurfacing to take place again at the County Council's request. So that the nature and usability of that route as a whole will alter quite significantly as a result of the scheme. So it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but coming back to your question you asked, for those living in the developments, and indeed anyone traversing that side of the town, there would be a tangible and usable route up to the sort of Morrison's area of town without having to go through the town centre.
Lovely, thank you very much. Our 10-minute question time. No, the 10 minutes that is in the Constitution is up. Thank you. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for answering all of those questions. We will now go questions to the officers and debate. Thank you. Councillor Selby, thank you.
Questions to the officer then, please.
Please, can we just remember to address all the questions through the chairman? Thank you first. Thank you.
Yeah, I usually go through the chair, as you know. Yeah, through the chair to the officer. Can you tell me, please, from that top corner of the development that the last gentleman was talking about, what sort of distance are we looking at from that top corner, say to Morrison's, and will that area be fully lighted? Thank you.
You've got me on the distance. I couldn't say. I mean, I would say it's no more than a mile, probably closer to half a mile, but I wouldn't want to be quoted on that. I'm not aware of it. There's no proposals within the application to light that route. And as far as I'm aware, there is no lighting until you get to Uffington Road.
Thank you very much. Councillor Phil Dilks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thank you to Phil Moore for an excellent comprehensive site on Monday of this week, and for the team in where we've got to. I've actually got 4 questions, Madam Chairman. Am I going to be allowed to ask 4 questions?
I think 4 for anybody to try and remember all of them in one go. Should we go for 2 first, and then let other speakers ask questions and then come back to you?
Thank you. It's much better to actually to allow a councillor to ask all the questions, but that's a personal view. Can I ask then, first of all, for Mr. Moore, would you just give us a bit more on why there is no environmental impact assessment? I know what it says in the report, but for such a major development that is clearly going to have an environmental impact, I would have thought it would have qualified as one, but there seems to be a bit of a get out clause there. That's the first one. The second one, if you're asking me, is, and it does follow on from what the colleague from Stanford Town Council said, Councillor Ford. He almost wrote my speech when I come to debate for me. I don't know the gentleman. I didn't know he was going to say that. But the question is, can you confirm that the applicant, given the fact that we've got SD, it's about climate change and mitigation, etc. Given the fact that we've got SD1, the policy, which is, you know, a standard request in developments of this size that talks about sustainable development, would it have been within the applicant's gift, given that the applicant, or half of it, is this council, which is a climate change council, would it have been in our gift, the applicant's gift, to have declared this development as a green village or a carbon zero site, which in my view would have been a great asset and a way forward, and something would be a feather in Stanford's cap, particularly given that Stanford, of course, is the first conservation area in the country. Thank you. I've got 2 more after that, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. If you'd like to answer, Ben.
On the first point about EIA screening, the proposals prior to submission did go through an environmental impact assessment screening process. Formal legal process was assessed against the criteria in the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017, and it was found that it would not have, in accordance with guidance and those regulations, sufficient impact to warrant a requirement for it to be accompanied by an environmental assessment. So that's a process that has been gone through. On the second point, I'm not exactly sure what the definition of a green village might be, but I understand the principle of what you're saying about carbon zero things. It is open to any applicant to propose a scheme in whatever terms they wish to do. I think perhaps the most important thing is that, first of all, I don't think planning policies are in place to mean that the council, as planning authority, can require something to be carbon zero at the moment. However, that said, the application was assessed against the policy, SD1, And that's resulted in condition 30, you may see towards the end of the report. And condition 30 really reflects some of the material that the applicants themselves submitted along with their building for life assessment. And it's been considered by officers that that should do the job to make sure that the buildings themselves are sustainable and that the development as a whole has the right measures in place.
Yeah. Can I just add something to the first question that you asked, Councillor Dilks, about environmental impact assessment? EIA development is, you're really talking about very large scale development that has really significant environmental impacts. I mean, I'm talking about things like HS2, nuclear power stations, steelworks, those kinds of things. That's primarily what it's meant for. Although that's not to say that other developments don't fall into that category. But the absence of an environmental impact assessment doesn't mean that we're not assessing the environmental impacts or that we don't require sufficient information. We still would require, for a development of this size, and we have required it and it has been submitted, sufficient information in the form of reports, noise assessments, for example, ecological assessments, heritage impact assessments, a whole package of information for us to be able to assess the development. So hopefully that answers your point.
Thank you. Councillor Robbins, thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions, please. With 7.7.14.1, will this comply with the design guide SPD due this November? That's my first question. The second is on page 62, same page, 7.14.3, where it says it's the council's urban design officer considers that this package is a strong proposal, which scores relatively well overall. Can you explain what relatively well means? And the third question was also, I am in support of the development. I think it'd be a positive improvement, definitely, to Barnet Road. I know it has been discussed, but I also have issues with the traffic going from Barnet Road to St Martin's and Water Street. Having children that were at Barnet School for many years, and I did that route a lot, I found that the traffic, there is a lot of traffic, and I can't understand how there is a net reduction when there's more houses, jobs. The schools are, unless you go to Barnet School, the schools are across the other side of Stanford. So okay, the private school isn't, but the other schools are all across. You can't really walk to them. So I know that has been mentioned, but that is another concern.
Thank you.
So if I take your 3 points, the first one was about the design guide. My understanding is that that's not been formally adopted yet. However, we haven't identified any conflicts, and bearing in mind the outline nature of the application, it's worth remembering that the reserve matters, when they're submitted, can be assessed against that guide if it's been adopted at that point. You asked a question also about the design officer's comments about scoring relatively well. I think really that's a reflection that against sort of scoring systems with large numbers of criteria, it's almost impossible to sort of score 100%. And I think, without wishing to put words into the design officer's mouth, I think what he's saying is that it's scoring perhaps better than a lot of developments that go over his desk would, and that it scores most definitely at a level which he says makes it a good scheme. So I hope that explains that a little bit. And then the third key issue was about the traffic impacts, which have been discussed at some length here. I'm not sure I've got a huge amount to add to what's already been said by the applicants and others. I mean, the traffic situation is dealt with in section 7.3, I think. And yes, I would support the view that the assessment of traffic based upon the assumption that the existing permitted uses of the site could resume at any time. My view is that's robust, and that has been supported by the local highway authority, Lincolnshire County Council. And that's the starting point to look at this. So the Cummins factory site could be reoccupied right now without any further planning permissions. And the extant planning permission for office development on the field to the east, although there are no buildings on the site at the moment, that does have a reserve matters approval, and it was lawfully implemented with the provision of an access point. And it's accepted that, again, that could be built and start to operate at any time. So that has to form the basis for the assessment, and that leads to the table in section 7.3 that you'll see, which identifies an overall net reduction in traffic movements at the peak periods. And that's when most of the problems occur. It's also worth remembering that as the nature of the development will be slightly different to what is already allowed there, the patterns will change, and the mixed use development is perhaps more likely to lead to some of the peaks in traffic movements being somewhat smoothed off. That's my understanding.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to speak in debate. I didn't have any questions. Well, with respect, Madam Chairman, there were 2 more intended questions. Thank you. And then I'd like to go into debate.
Thank you. Paul Woods, please, and then I'll come to Phil.
I'm quite happy to let Councillor Dilks go before me if you want.
I'm quite happy for you to speak. Councillor Dilks has already asked a question. You haven't, so I want everybody to speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll ask I've got 2 questions, Madam Chairman, there. The first one is affordable housing. It states in the report that 30% affordable housing of the conventional housing, that's 57 out of the 190. But I'm wondering about, and there is a comment made about the housing in the retirement village, that's at 150, which therefore totals 340, and 57 is only 18% of that. So I wondered, is that the total, the 57? Are we achieving, we're not achieving 30% overall. So I just wondered if that could be explained. And I've got a second question. The second question is, I realise this is an outline planning application, and I must admit, I always find it a little bit confusing when we get quite a few illustrative plans, which are just illustrative for what they are on elevations. And I notice on one of the comments by the design pad, it talks about going into the design pad as if it'd been satisfactory on the proposals and the layouts. But how can that be? Because I assume we'll get a full application later when we get the full details of what's actually being built and the phasing. It just seemed to conflict with me. I didn't quite understand paragraph 7.14.3 when it talks about the design. I wonder if that could be explained to me, please. So those 2 questions, please.
Yeah, so if I turn to the affordable housing question first, you'll see in the report section 7.7 from 7.7.11 onwards, quite a lengthy discussion there, going over the relevant issues. Yes, the council's policy in H2 is for 30% affordable housing from the entire capacity of the site. That's the sort of default starting position for all sites. That is true. However, it is recognised in the policy that in some instances, sometimes when it relates to unusual developments, things that weren't perhaps in mind when the local plan came forward, that there may be cases where a viability assessment might be submitted to examine whether the scheme can afford to deliver that level of affordable housing, whether it would still remain viable. And through the course of the application, officers decided that it was appropriate to accept a viability assessment. And so we looked at whether the scheme could afford 30% over its entirety. And the applicants did prepare a viability assessment of the whole scheme, the whole mixed use development. Now that has found, and it's been agreed by the council's own independent viability assessor, that within the terms on which viability assessments are carried out, which make certain assumptions about landowner profit, developer profit, costs of development and the like, it's been found that on the basis of those assumptions, this site cannot afford to provide any affordable housing from the retirement village element. And indeed, there's a question mark over viability delivering any affordable housing from the site. Now, I think it's worth remembering that those assumptions about profit for the developer and the landowner, they relate, generally speaking, to something like a 20% uplift. So sometimes a site can be considered as unviable. Doesn't mean it doesn't make any profit at all and won't be developed. It just means that it can't really, according to normal standards, deliver that level of affordable housing. And in this case, the viability assessment, as I said, indicates it wouldn't be viable with affordable housing. However, the applicants have agreed to continue with delivering 30% affordable housing from the conventional part of the site. Now, you came to the numbers and the sort of 57, yes, that only relates to the conventional housing. And if you took, if the whole of the retirement village was to be dwellings as such, rather than care home beds, and it is possible that some of it will consist of care home beds, which are not dwellings as such. But even if all of the 150 came forward as dwellings, the 30% from the conventional housing would mean when you looked at the scheme as a whole, it would be about 17%. But that 17%, as we say, is something which the viability assessment says they don't actually have to provide. So we've fed that 17% in from the whole site, so 57 dwellings, and we said in the overall planning balance for the site, this has to be seen as a significant benefit. So it's unfortunate that the site can't afford to deliver the full amount we would normally like, but it is, if you like, going above and beyond what might be required on the basis of the viability assessment. And I know that's a very long-winded answer, I'm afraid, but it's sort of trying to summarise the lengthy discussion in the report. So your second point, which has entirely slipped my mind now, goes to yeah.
How can that be? Parameters and stuff. Will it have to go through another?
Well, yeah, the short answer to your second point is yes. When the reserve matters application comes forward, it will be scrutinised on its own against the relevant standards, including possibly the design SPD. It'll go to another design pad. The design pad is able, though, to look at the outline proposals and what's indicatively suggested for the site. And that enables the council to take a view on general points about how the site should be developed. And the application does include things like parameters plans showing sort of overall areas of the sites, the direction design would inevitably go. So although the conditions suggested don't tie the development down to a particular detailed scheme, they do direct it. And indeed, there's a requirement for the details that come forward to adhere to the applicant's own submitted placemaking code. So we have, I think, quite a number of things in place to make sure that the direction of travel for the development is the one that was originally proposed, and we will get sufficient detail and a high quality scheme as a result.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can I just clarify, this is questions and not debate yet?
I think we normally go into like a question debate so we can discuss things, don't we? Thank you.
Okay. So I'll ask my two questions and then give my contribution to the debate, if I may then. It follows Councillor Wood's question about affordable homes, but also it's about all these things, and it's the frustration I think we all have with an outline planning application. And the question really is, how watertight are some of these assumptions that we're now making? And I know it's a difficult one to answer, but particularly on affordable homes, we almost, if I can say, there's 3 places in the report that talks about affordable homes, and in almost each of those places, we seem to be almost inviting a future applicant bringing reserved matters to sort of say, look, we're not going to make the 30% that we require. It's almost an invitation to, I won't go through the wording, but if it can be demonstrated this is not possible, provision may be made off-site or as a last resort through a commuted financial sum in lieu of provision. It just seems to be an invitation, as I say, to not make the 30%, which is disappointing given the applicant is this council. But I do welcome what you say, that the council and the joint applicants are continuing to pursue the 30%. But what's the reality when it comes? We all know what happens when it comes back. I'm sorry, we couldn't make it. It's not viable. I appreciate you've said some words around that. So that's the first question, if I may. I'll ask the second one, if I may, on that. The Section 106 agreements, which are on page 63, I think. I read them earlier in the week, and it doesn't seem to me that there is an awful lot coming our way in terms of Section 106 for a development of this size. Particularly concerned about the railway crossing, and whilst I accept that there is provision for Network Rail to put in a meerkat audible sound to say there's a train coming, as the applicant actually said, the crossing isn't actually conducive to particularly older people crossing. I crossed it on the site visit, and there are quite where the rail sort of goes by, there's potential to drop your foot in between the rail and the boarding, if I can put that. And that really does worry me. It is, even with the mitigation of an audible alarm, it's still, the actual, as I understand it, the actual crossing isn't going to change. So it's still going to be an unmanned crossing. That's, you're going to take your life in your own hands, basically. Some people would, to get across there, and that will discourage people from using it, in my view. So I come to, and I questioned this at the site visit, and I said, would it be mad, for us to be suggesting under 106 that a pedestrian footbridge is put in rather nearer the development than right on the edge of it anyway, which would encourage better connectivity with those on foot getting to the town, and would reduce some of the traffic concerns down Barnet Road and into town. So my question really on that is, are we confident we've done enough? Have we got enough on the Section 106? Could we have perhaps squeezed a bit more, and particularly a pedestrian bridge out of it? So those are my 2 questions. I'll move on to the debate, if I may.
Should we answer those 2
Happy
questions?
to,
Yeah, thank you. Would you like to answer them? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. On the affordable housing question, that actually relates to the 106, of course, because the affordable housing will be secured and required by the Section 106 agreement, and grant of planning permission is dependent upon that. And that does very clearly specify 30% from the conventional element of the housing. So I'm very confident that that is secured and will be delivered. And then secondly, on a more general point about is sufficient infrastructure provided, my view as the officer handling it is that yes, that has been done. £80,000 is to be paid towards the provision of the crossing upgrade. Network Rail, my understanding is that they did have this in a programme, but not for some years. And in my experience, Network Rail are a very safety conscious organisation, that they take a lot of these things very seriously. And I think when they install the Meerkat system and when they've commented on applications like this, they take that safety conscious approach and they'll have taken this into account, and they see this as a significant improvement to the crossing. So again, on that basis, I'm quite confident that enough has been done to secure safety. I can't really comment as to whether they have a programme, and as part of the Meerkat system, they would also maybe look to close gaps between boards on the railway. I can't really answer that question. But in terms of a bridge, I can't see a planning basis for requiring such a bridge, given the consultation with Network Rail, their comments, rights of way officers' comments from the County Council. I don't think that will be justified. And one of the difficulties with installing a structure which would have to be quite large to go over the railway bridge there, it will be very substantial and would raise a lot of other planning issues. For instance, it will be quite visible within the setting of things like St Leonardos Priory, Grade 1 listed building. My suspicion is that it would create perhaps more problems than it would solve, and I'm happy with the safety provision of the Meerkat.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Overall, I welcome the development, and particularly I would sooner see this development as in the application than the extant developments. I've got to say I was surprised that Burley have got planning permission, but they have for industrial development on a greenfield open site opposite Burley House. But there we are. They've got that, and they got it in 2006, and apparently they've dug a hole and put a post in. So it's you know, that counts as they've started the development apparently. I do welcome it, but I think, you know, there are genuine concerns that have been raised. My concern, and I've got this, you know, written before the councillor from the town council came and talked about climate change, and I think he's got a very good point. This is, you know, a good development, but I think it could be better, and it could. In my view, the fact that the council owns half the site and we're working with Burley as well, gave a real opportunity to develop a carbon neutral site. And I just do think it would have been a great feather in our caps, in the council's, in the applicants' caps, to have gone down that route. I hope it's not too late to actually do that. I suspect it is, though, because I can see that what's going to happen, and you know, I'm not against this, but I can see that the council and Burley will want to be selling the site for a maximum profit at the earliest opportunity with outline planning permission. Then, as we know, what happens is the purchasers will come back in a given time with their reserve matters application, and you know, what we're being told carefully is only indicative, and as the gentleman from the applicant actually said, you know, yes, we tried to nail down sustainability, and we hope you know, that it's going to be in advance or more than is required in building regulations, but he couldn't actually say what, because you know, that was a matter for reserve matters, as it clearly is. But given the fact that we are a climate change council, I think it was in the power, and still is in the power, of SK to declare this site as a carbon neutral or carbon zero development at this stage, as the council is a climate change council. And if you look at the average, you know, carbon output per person, I was just looking up on Googling it, and it's quite difficult to get, but the average person in this country emits 8 to 12 tons, depending on which site you look at. 8 to 12 tons of carbon per year per person, and a family of 4 emits 45 tons on average a year. And what worries me, and I've said this before in this chamber on many occasions, we are a climate change council, and we are working towards zero carbon to meet the government's targets by 2050 of zero carbon to being a zero carbon council. But every month we come to planning meetings like this one, and we approve applications with absolutely no mitigation on climate change, and quite the reverse. Those houses that we approve every month, including this application, are generating thousands more tons of carbon into the air. And I just think that's a bit hypocritical. And we should, not only in this application, but in all applications, in my view, we should have a paragraph, and we have paragraphs on all sorts of things, heritage, construction and that, but we should be having a climate change mitigation paragraph, at least in certainly in all major applications. I've said enough. I am going to support the application because I think it is an improvement. Just on the speed limits, I would welcome if we could at least note. I think I'm right in saying, because I noticed a couple of cars went by really quite fast when we were at the site, and we discussed it and agreed that it was actually 40 miles an hour directly outside the site, or outside most of it. I would welcome, the Highways Authority at an early stage, reducing it to 30 to the edge of the development. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bijner Singh.
Finally, thank you, Madam Chairman. I've got 4 questions too, Madam Chairman. I wonder if I'm allowed to ask them, but I will do my, during the debate, I would like to put my points separately. Thank you, Madam Chairman. What I would like to go on, quite nicely, my question number 1, I did mention it to Officer Phil Moore at during the site visit. In fact, the thing is, some clarification had been thrown on that with the applicant agent mentioning with regards to the unmade track that will be resurfaced, remade. I'll be very much appreciative, and also if I could be we could be informed, the resurfacing, what sort of material is that going to be? Is that on tarmacs, or is it going to be just rubbles? And I believe also the indications was, or the way I understood from the gentleman explaining it, that the track all the way up to Uffington Road will be made. And will that be tarmac and perfectly level so people can actually work with that quite safely and lights put on? This is my question number 1. And secondly, with regards to noise limitations on paragraph 7.5.1, policy and 4, noise mitigation. I wonder if you could ask, as a track is higher than the development site, can we ask for a further 106 agreement to mitigate the noise effect by having an earth bond, and on which should be either plants or some kinds of fencing for as a noise deflector or a noise absorbent materials for that.
I think we'll answer those 2 questions first.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the path servicing, I can't from the top of my head remember exactly what is proposed for the path. I think, though, it's more likely to be a hard packed surface, so it will be level, but that's something that would be more appropriate for the rural edge of the settlement rather than an actual sealed tarmac surface. will allow infiltration and things like that. So it's considered more sustainable, but the surface will be significantly improved. The second point about noise, a noise assessment was submitted, was considered appropriate, both in terms of its assessment of the potential impacts on the development from the railway, and in terms of construction and commercial activities on local residents, both existing local residents over on the Edgar Garden side and in the new development. We do have a planning condition proposed which says that further details have to come forward as part of the reserve matters to show for each part of the development how noise potential impacts have been assessed. Now that could, in theory, include a bund, but it's quite open to the applicants to propose different measures, and they may include things like design measures, the way you orientate buildings. It could include separation from the railway. It can include fences, heavy timber fences are often very effective, and things like triple glazing. So there's a wide range, and at the moment, I don't see any planning justification for asking to secure specifically a bund alongside the railway. We're happy that it can be mitigated and that further details can be controlled by planning condition.
Thank you. Yeah, next two questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. But I said the actual, with regard to the noise, I said just quickly onto that, as where the retirement homes are going to be, the distance between that and the track is a lot closer to what actually where all the houses are going to be. So I think probably that should be considered more seriously. I think probably a 106 agreement will help tremendously towards it. My second questions again, Councillor Phil Dilks did ask about it for lowering all the speed limits to 30 miles per hour on the Barnard Road past development sites. This is I wonder if that can be put to highways if as a mitigations as well for that. And also to carry on with that, what possibility, because I'm very concerned about the amount of traffic, especially at the junctions of Barnard Road and St. Martin's there. If there's some kind of traffic mitigation, like a small mini roundabout to enable traffic to move, or else there'll be tremendous congestion there. But also to have considered the Park Lane tracks behind Lumby's Terrace, because that will become a shortcut, a rat race that we can't already do that when the St. Martin's Hill is actually clogged up with traffic in the afternoon, and in the morning they do take a shortcut down onto the water streets. So I would either to have by way of a no entry sign at the top of Barnard Road entering into Park Lane, or in some way to have some mitigation so that stop traffic going down that road.
If I take your second point first, the issue of traffic movements and their patterns has been considered in the transport assessment, and again the Highway Authority have agreed with the applicant that there are no measures such as mini roundabouts or traffic management schemes which are justified to be put in place and required for this planning application. So we take the guidance of the local highway authority on that, but it's not justified to try and secure those things through section 106. And on the other point, and it's a similar answer, I'm afraid, on the question of speed, this was raised with the highway authority, and paragraph 7.3.10 of the report deals with this, that the highway authority say that it's not actually something which they can secure from the application. It's not justified in terms of the traffic proposed and the safety issues raised. There's good visibility along the road, and they say this is not something which we can secure.
Thank you.
surveys were done during a lockdown, there was not that much traffic that was going through there. So everything emanated from that on the traffic survey or whatever LCCs come up with highways is false, because you have to do it when now currently people are using the roads. You can come and see every day in the morning and in the afternoon the amount of traffic that is on the bridge. And it is being used now.
I think on the question of speed, as has been pointed out, the traffic survey was carried out not to assess traffic levels, the amount of traffic on the road. It was done for speed purposes. And even following that assessment, which was undertaken during lockdown, the Highway Authority concluded that it was not necessary to secure a reduction in the speed limit along the road. And during lockdown, if anything, you would have expected the speed surveys to have shown a higher level of speeding along that road. You would have expected that, if anything, because there's less traffic and therefore people tend to drive more quickly when there are fewer cars along a stretch of road such as that. So on a sort of precautionary basis, if you like, the speed survey tends to indicate, and the Highway Authority have agreed, that a reduction in the speed limit is not justified as a requirement of this application.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Reid.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. This is an outline application that indeed has been quite a long time in actually coming to today. In fact, I know of 2 years of deliberations one way or another. I don't think that's been a bad thing, because I think one of the things I've done this afternoon is I've listened also to my other colleagues on the committee as to if there is anything else that lawfully and legally we could have within this outline commission. I think the one first peace of mind that comes, and to be heralded, is the fact that it's got a proper master plan. I think also that in arriving at today, members of the committee have had many opportunities and presentations as to this application coming forward. And indeed, I for one believe that during those deliberations, we have been listened to and adjustments have been made along the way. That's not also to say that Natural England have taken their time in coming forward with what their recommendations actually are. That actually gives me some peace of mind when we're looking at the 106 agreement and indeed the hilltop and the natural spoilage potential, which I've listened to concerns. I think this particular site has huge benefits for Stanford and for the south of the county. It's good to learn that Stanford's neighbourhood plan, which is not yet adopted, but is a long way down that journey, that there's no conflict within this application, and that is going to be hopefully approved by the public when it comes to their referendum. Design and input on the character assessment is always going to be sensitive. Yes, I think there's perhaps some issue of consideration as to where it actually sits, whether it sits at outline or whether in fact it sits at detailed permission. I think, to be fair to my county council colleagues and indeed planning committee members, that it sits with both outline and detailed will be the best that we can actually do to see that is developed. I think the development is to be heralded. I think the design that we've seen to date is something that is exciting and indeed will be a welcome contribution to Stanford, and thank goodness will set an example for what we have seen one or two previously disappointing developments that have come forward first. So I'm really, really pleased that's where we are. I think The conditions that within the outline application, as I can see, are as robust as they can be. I take heart that we as a district council are in a better position than we've ever been, that now we have an assistant director of planning, one that has much experience and one that I hope my colleagues will take some confidence, as indeed I do, that when this comes to reserve matters, she will robustly see that our planning team make sure that that is as it should be. And I have every confidence that that will be done at an arm's length agreement and quite apart from the 50% acquisition that we have as a council. The carbon neutral things I listened to many times on committee. And, you know, I, like many, would like carbon neutral conditions to be levied. But, you know, as a committee, if it's not lawful, then we can't. Or if we do, they can only be repealed against. And so I therefore urge each and every one of us to actually work the best we can at seeing that carbon neutral law is developed as quickly as it possibly can do, and that will actually expedite this. But for this particular development, we can appeal to best judgments and market values where carbon neutral is concerned, particularly with high energy prices. We have in this room, I'm one neighbouring county councillor, Councillor Phil Dilks is another one, and indeed the leader is another county councillor. And indeed, I'd like to also mention, because I feel it's absolutely fit, that the late Councillor Mike Exton would also want to have heralded and wanted, to the best of our abilities, to see that the speed restriction reductions were actually not only seriously thought about, but that they were implemented. I am aware, and it is, as I understand, 30 miles an hour at this particular thing, but it is a gateway of 40 miles an hour. We all have scars from not being able to achieve, despite our best endeavours, to move the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on Uffington Road. So I'm sure my colleagues in the County Council will join with me in wanting to expedite as soon as possible the intentions to move outwards the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit by way of a traffic regulation order. And I know from the hearts and minds that we will all try to do that. There is nothing more urgently important about this application, this particular application accentuates levy of that happening. To that end, Chairman, the 2 years dimension, the master plan, the design, where we are, the competence now of our planning committee, which I'm very grateful for. I'd like to propose that we approve the recommendation. I'll look for a seconder and I'll be very interested in anything else that could possibly come out in debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Penny Milnes, you indicated. No, sorry, Robbins.
I'd like to second that.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Judy Stevens, you wish to speak?
Yeah, there are some concerns that I just want to, might as well say what they are. I am concerned about that level crossing, actually, because what we are going to be seeing, hopefully, in one way, is more people using it than are currently using it. And so, and if we want them all to use it to get into town that way rather than go by the road, then there will be, and I just really worry. I'm really, really worried about that level crossing. There's no point in me saying otherwise. I'm worried about it. So I hope that that will register. I also take on board what's been said about sustainability, both from the applicant and also from members and the officers. We can't go, we can't listen to David Attenborough every night on television and have high levels of concern that are being represented to me by my ward members on the one hand, and then build stuff on the other, which which flies directly in the face of that. There's got to be some sort of understanding that we've got to move towards some sort of carbon neutral way of behaving. So it is an opportunity for this applicant. The reason why I asked the architect, I think Adam, whether they'd been responsible for Edgar, is it Edgar Gardens or Edgar Close, Phil? Edgar Gardens. Absolutely brilliant, absolutely a fantastic design. I think we were all blown away by the design of that. And I wanted to congratulate you, but obviously wrong person. But yeah, really very good. And I hope that we could use that blueprint throughout the district, so that we stop building these, less than desirable estates, and we start looking much more towards that kind of development. It was fantastic. The space and so on, I won't go on, but it was very, very good. However, this is an additional opportunity to make this development right on the as you come into Stanford, opposite Burley, to make this a development that is worthy of the 21st century and that responds to public concerns and frankly the concerns of all of us, would be a fantastic achievement. So I do hope that can be done. Obviously as well, in line with that, the hills and hollows is a concern. I think that this we've experienced similar in Deeping with the overuse of the Deeping Lakes, which is a site of scientific beauty, natural beauty, whatever it is, has been used much more during lockdown, actually, where people have been going out walking. So it might be that the concern has been accentuated by that sort of effect. But I do think we need to keep that uppermost in our minds as well going forward as we take this plan to the next stage. And obviously, the other thing, I actually did beg the question that you did the traffic. You did your traffic survey in the middle of lockdown, but that was okay because we weren't looking at the numbers, we were just looking at the speed. But then that does beg the question, why didn't you do a survey looking at the numbers? That has to be said. And why wasn't that then done at a time when people were using it? So I don't know why we didn't do that, but obviously we haven't done. But it does strike me that there is an opportunity here. And I rather hope that maybe the neighbourhood plan might take it up. But I think in all of our towns, we need to be looking at a hop-on, hop-off bus sort of situation. Because, you talk about children going to school and all the schools being in the north of Stanford and not in the south. If there was a bus to take them, then you wouldn't have everyone getting in their vehicles and going and then being in that terrible traffic jam over the bridge. So, those are my comments. I, however, do welcome this. I hope it's going to be sensitively executed. I've got every faith that it will be. I'm sure, but I think Burley were involved in Edgar Close or whatever it was, and if they are in this, I have faith that they will produce something that we'll all be proud of. And I would like to applaud both Phil and you, Ben, for all the work that you've obviously done in this. I think you've done a good job, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ian Selby.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman, we've been going 2 hours. I hope we're going to have a comfort break after this item. I'm sure we're not the only person thinking that at this moment in time.
Make it snappy, then. Ian.
Yeah, shall Madam Chairman, I can show you. The 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, it's not an unreasonable request in my view. So I'll move on swiftly after that. The lighting concern that I raised earlier, I hope that obviously this is at the outline stage at the moment. So when it comes back to the full planning, I hope that will be addressed because that's a lane going towards Morrison's. I mean, in Grantham we've got Queen's Park and we've got a green lane adjacent to my ward. They've both got street lighting. And I think it's something that really should be considered. So I hope when it comes back to full planning application, I hope something like that will be looked into at the very least. Item number 31 on the agenda, page 76, kiddies play area. I hope that when it comes back to full planning, I hope there'll be something substantial for the kiddies at the very least, number of houses there. I hope that will be considered. So yeah, just putting that one out there for you guys to look into when it comes back. And my final comment, Madam Chairman, is as this is council-owned land, I just think it would be nice if something for social housing could have been considered. We've got enough people crying out for council housing. It would have been nice in my view. However, anyway, that's my views, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've all had a good discussion and a debate, and as Councillor Selby has said, we have been going for some time. I would like to thank Phil Moore and Ben Hunt for all your hard work that has gone into this to make it the presentation and the application as it is. I think going forward, it will be a huge benefit to the town and to the district, and to show developers in the future what we can do once we get it through the Section 73 and bring it back. We've had a proposer, we've had a seconder, so I'd like to go to the vote. Oh, I thought you had already spoken on your debate. You'd been some time. Right, okay. So we'll have you to discuss in your debate, and then we will go to the vote. Thank you.
I'll be brief, Madam Chairman. I welcome this much needed development in Stanford. I support it. However, I feel that there are a number of issues that have been missed or omitted for the sake of expediency, I would say. You know, our SK local plan H2, which has been mentioned quite a bit here, states that the major development must have 30% of the houses available as affordable homes. But not only as it is, and SKDC in partnership with Burley, we should have at least considered some percentages of social housing, i.e. council houses, to replenish our stock, our housing stocks, especially in Stanford, where we have a shortage of it. This is a missed opportunity. As paragraph 528 under SKDC affordable housing, the officer says, the reductions of the percentages will be considered as paragraph 529 states that overall conclusion that the proposal is technically not viable with any affordable housing, because that is further confirmed in paragraph 7.711, second 2, where I believe that that they have hedged the bets there. Should that not be possible on this particular sites, then it can be provided somewhere else, as my colleague mentioned, with regards to what happens on the Kettering Road development. We had a secondary where the affordable homes were put in Barnack Road, which is the Edgar Gardens. It is a fantastic development. It is well pointed, as Councillor Judith Stevens mentioned about it. But however, coming to that, if quite a lot of the residents of that particular development has asked, can the land in between the Edgar Garden and the new development going to be allocated for allotments, because they would like to grow their own vegetations, their own foods there. I wonder if that can be considered instead of a car park to be tarmacked. Now, however, coming back to the highways have raised no objections. As Councillor Reid pointed out that, okay, there are a number of things that we would like to see. I would dearly love to see that the speed limit of 30 miles per hour could be extended past the development boundary on this one. The traffic certainly will increase in the morning, during the day, and as well in the evening as well. As most of the shops and surgeries, dentists, hospitals, schools are all situated on the north side of the town. So there will be automatically traffic that will be leaving that side to go on the other side to it. We have not spoken about the the treatment room that is being suggested on this site. What is this treatment room going to provide? How is it going to be manned? Is there going to be a doctor? Especially when you consider there is a retirement village there, there will be needs for that. But apart from that, there are the shops, very limited shops on the sites, but actually the major shops and the shopping malls are like Morrison's, Waitrose and all that, all in this side of the river, on the north side of it. So that was my concern. My second concern is because most of the people will be accessing that side, especially taking in summer during the daytime crossing, coming to the level crossing there. I consider it's not safe just to have a meerkat type arrangement put in there, as mentioned by Councillor Dilk, that the spacing between the tracks and the actual boards are quite wide, and the danger of people's feet being stuck in there. If that could be improved further, I would welcome that on it. On the whole, I will very much support this development, which is much needed here, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bisnesi. Right, we will go to the vote then. We've had a proposer, we've had a seconder. Can I have those voting all in favour, please raise your hand. And that is a unanimous decision. Thank you very much. And we will now take a comfort break, Councillor Selby. And we will be back here at 3:25, please. Thank you. Right, lovely. Can everybody take the seats? And we will go to item 5, application S21 1425, and we have Chris Brown presenting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Plan Committee. This application is for the change of use to a dog exercise paddock, reinstatement of a vehicular access and erection of 2 wooden shelters. And the site is at Oaklands, Main Street in Ingoldsby. The key issues as part of this application are the principle of development, the impact on the character and appearance of the area, impact on highway safety, flooding and drainage, and the impact on neighbouring amenity. So this is a aerial view of the sort of wider view of the site that shows the relationship of the site to the rest of the village of Ingoldsby. Now more of a zoomed in view of the site. So the site is the large triangular field there in the centre of your screen. Access is to be taken from Main Street to the south of the site that runs east to west along the bottom of your screen there. This is the red line site location plan. So this shows the site outlined in red, again with access shown from Main Street at the bottom of the site there. The areas, it's worth noting that the area outlined in blue is the applicant's own dwelling, a bungalow called Oaklands. So moving on to the proposal, if you just bear with me a second, I'll try and get a cursor up. So first of all, if you can follow the cursor in the center of the screen now, I've moved this, I'll move it around slightly so you can pick it up. Where the cursor is at the moment is on the proposed parking. So this is an existing area of parking and hard standing that isn't to be amended at all. It's the existing surfacing, and that's to be used for the proposed parking for the site. Immediately to the north of that, if I just move the cursor up ever so slightly, that's the first of 2 proposed pergolas. I'll come on to, I've got a separate plan of those separately later. So this one's a pergola proposed for dog washing and drying facilities, effectively just to provide some shelter. I'll move on to number 3. So this area here is proposed for further screen planting. So you'll note from the previous aerial views and from this view that there's an existing line of an extensive tree belt immediately to the northwest of the site in a linear fashion along that hedgerow. This proposed additional planting proposes to continue that line of planting and provide further screening to the southwest border of the site there. Number 4 is the sort of 3 dark green areas in the centre of the site. So number 1 there, number 2 there, and number 3 there. So they're all areas of structural planting proposed to be planted onto the existing site. Number 5, if I move the cursor up to the top left-hand corner of the site, is the second of the 2 proposed pergolas. Number 6 is an area proposed for the dog agility area within the centre of the site. And number 7 is effectively all of the rest of the site, so the lighter green colour, which is the dog exercise area. So moving on to a couple of photographs. So this shows the existing area of hard standing proposed to be the area of parking for the site. And that's the view sort of taken looking north-northwest into the site. So again, this is now sort of turned around the other way. This is looking at the existing parking area. The buildings there, the small sort of stable buildings proposed to be demolished. So this is now a view looking east along Main Street. The site entrance is there immediately shown on the left where that purple car is coming out of the entrance. That proposed is the entrance to the existing dwelling of Oaklands and the proposed entrance to the site as well. So this is now further up the entrance to the site. So this photograph is taken past the vehicular entrance to the host dwelling of Oaklands, now looking to where the proposed access would be. So the proposed access would be just to the left of this photograph, beyond that stable building shown there on the left-hand side, beyond the hedge. I'll come on to the claim footpath, but effectively for purposes of illustration, that's immediately directly in front of where this photograph is taken. So directly along that track, immediately forwards. This is the proposed pergola. So there's 2 of these proposed on the site. Both are to be identical at opposite ends of the site. The pergola is a timber structure, a very simple timber structure, open in nature, 4.2 metres in height to the ridge, but with low eaves of 2.4 metres. and effectively a 5.5 metre square. Moving on to evaluation of the proposal, the principle of development is considered acceptable in compliance with policy E7. No adverse impacts on the character and appearance of the area are considered. No adverse impacts on neighbouring land uses are considered subject to further conditions. So these include conditions restricting the hours of use, restricting the number of dogs on the site, restrictions over no lighting, and also the requirement for the applicants to keep a register. The County Council, as the Highway Authority, you've confirmed that the highway impact is not considered to be severe and have no objections to the proposal. And further, the County Council, in terms of their countryside officer, so in relation to footpaths, have stated that subject to access to the claimed footpath not being obstructed by the proposed development, they do not wish to object. Further details of this, the claimed footpath, and that now moving forward to become a legal footpath are outlined in the additional items paper. A couple of additional verbal updates to add to that final slide. So first of all, there was a typo in relation to the name of the applicant. So the name of the applicant should be Mr. L. Allen, not Mr. J. Allen, as printed in the papers. And furthermore, I'd like to add 2 verbal update conditions to the proposal as well. So the first one is, prior to first use of the site, a dog waste bin shall be provided on site, which the applicant has proposed, and a contract shall be entered into with the council's commercial waste team for the removal of that waste. And secondly is for further details of that, the screen planting and structural planting that was shown to you on that, the indicative, not the indicative view, the overall view of the site to be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Therefore, in accordance with the development plan and with no material considerations otherwise indicate refusal, the application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that presentation, Chris. Do I have any questions? Councillor Dilks.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. Can I just say first off, I know that this has come to the committee because it is a major application. It is a major application based on size of the area. And I think it is an example of something that possibly doesn't need to come to the committee. And I would welcome, when we're reviewing what comes to committee, and I speak as the advocate who brought in campaigned to get all major applications coming to committee after a particular incident. But I do accept that, that applications such as that, although dog agilities can be very controversial, as I know in my own patch, I don't believe that this one is particularly. I note it is away from houses. I would like an indication from the planning officer if he's able to tell us how far away it is from the nearest house other than the applicant's. And I've almost forgotten what my question was, Madam Chairman. I did have a question. Oh, it was on what you just said right at the end. Oh, it was about us having a condition that they have to have a contract with the council. Well, there are other providers of such services, and I'm just not sure we should impose, say that it has to be a contract with the council. Would it be possible, to change that to, another provider? It just sounds not quite right, if I can say that. Thank you.
Thank you. And your first comments duly noted. Thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Chairman, and excuse me, thank you, Councillor Dilks. So in relation to your first question over the distance to the neighbouring dwellings, so the next neighbouring dwelling other than the host dwelling is called Hope Cove. And in terms of rough distances, it's approximately 50 metres from the closest part of the site to sort of the rear garden area, and approximately 70 metres to the rear elevation of the dwelling of Hope Cove. All I'd add to that as well is that's where there's the area of screen planting proposed as well. So that'll provide a further buffer, if you like, from where the dogs and their owners will be subject to their rear garden and dwelling. So there will be a substantial distance of up to 70 metres between the two. In relation to your second point on that condition, I welcome your comments on that. That condition that I proposed verbally effectively has been taken from a recent one that came to committee a couple of months ago at Baxter. So effectively, I've proposed the exact same wording as that one. I appreciate that the contract wouldn't have to necessarily be with the council's commercial waste team necessarily. There are other operators out there. I can come up with some sort of wording to amend that to effectively be prior to first use, dog waste bins shall be provided on site and a contract into with a suitable commercial waste team with details to be provided to the council if that overcomes your concerns on that one.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Chris. On the basis of your comments and the fact that if it's 70 metres away from the nearest house, the one in my village, as you know, that hasn't yet been determined by the inspector, then my objection was it was 16 metres from the nearest house. There's a big difference. And on that basis, I'd be happy if you're looking for a recommendation to recommend approval of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Councillor Woods.
Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Dilks says about the application. Actually, I was a bit surprised to see it, and I know officially it's classed as a major application, but it's not really, is it? It doesn't strike me as a major application, so I'd be quite happy for these sort of applications not to come to committee and be determined by officers. But I'm quite happy to, no problems with it. Quite happy to second Councillor Dilks' proposal to accept it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any other speakers or not? Anybody wish to ask any officers the questions? Councillor Bellamy.
No, the only thing I was going to say is the one in Deeping. If we had a discussion, didn't we, about whether it was SP4 or SP5 as well, and obviously because of the difference in the separations, like I say, we haven't got that problem with this one. So. And bearing in mind, I think the main area, the agility area, is right at the top of the site anyway, isn't it, Chris? So, and like I say, it doesn't suffer from the same problems as the other one, where all the homes adjacent to the site were along the side of the road.
Thank you very much. Do I have anybody else questions as we've got a proposal?
I was just going to say, Madam Chairman, with a tongue in cheek, you know, it's a huge area, appears to be a huge area for dog agility. I'm surprised we haven't got an application before us for a golf club.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions? We've had a proposer and a seconder, so shall we go to the vote then? All those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we will go on to agenda item 6, which is S210420. I believe Councillor Jackie Smith, you declared an interest when it came to planning last time, so may I ask you to leave? Thank you. Councillor Selby, that's unfair.
I will leave as well, Madam Chairman. I won't.
Yes, you have. Yes, you can leave because you weren't here at the last time it was brought up. So thank you very much. You've got to get out of jail free. Adam, when you're ready, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So yeah, as you say, this is S210420, and it is a full detailed planning application for the partial demolition of the social club and a proposed 2-storey extension and roof extension, and then change of use from A4 drinking establishment and D2 assembly hall to Class C3 residential use to create 15 units. And as you say, members will recall that this application was previously considered at the committee on the 22nd of July, where the committee resolved to approve the application subject to conditions and the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the affordable housing requirements as set out in that original committee report. Now, during the negotiation of that Section 106 agreement, further information has come forward from the Council's Partnership Projects Officer about the affordable housing, which now means that we're looking to amend those Section 106 heads of terms. So that is the key issue before members today. The application proposals, other than that element of affordable housing, remain the same as previously approved by this committee. But just to remind members of the site that we're dealing with and the exact proposals that are coming forward, the The site's situated between Westgate and Greyfriars in the centre of Grantham. So you just had an aerial overview, and again, just a more zoomed in view there, just showing the site in terms of the town centre there. And then just coming onto the site location plan, to the north, you've got the Conduit Lane car park. To the west, you've got single story industrial units. To the south, again, you've got an industrial unit. And then to the east, you've got the 3-story properties fronting onto Westgate there, which are grade 2 listed. And then the site is immediately adjacent to the conservation area boundary and adjacent to the and within the town centre area boundary, sorry. So just in terms of those existing buildings on site, again, members will be familiar with this from the previous time as discussed. There's an existing 1.5-story hall situated along the western end of the site, which you can see, just get a cursor up, which you can see here in this top image. You've then got a central 3-story element, which is largely constructed of brick. You've got a single-story addition on the eastern end, and then to the rear of the site, you've got a single-story element with a gable end and pitched roof, which connects the two of the buildings. And then in terms of what the development is looking at proposing, you've got the 1.5-story hall element that has currently got sufficient accommodation for 2 floors of accommodation and then a lower ground floor level. And that part of the proposal is to raise the roof height there to create an additional element of accommodation. 3-story central element is capable of conversion largely in its current form. And then the single-story structure to the rear of the site, that will be raised with 2-story extension. The gable ends would be retained, but the pitched roof element would be replaced. And then the single-story building in the east would be removed to create an outdoor courtyard area. And you've got a building here, which is a mixture of light and dark rendering, timber cladding, and the retention of brick elements. And then that's to create, as we say, is to create 15 units, which are a mix of 1-bed duplex apartments, so 1-bed single-story apartments, and then 2-bed single-story apartments. And again, just the site layout there showing in terms of the elements discussed previously about cycle storage, bin storage, etc. So again, just in terms of the matters to be considered by committee today, as I say, at the time of the original consideration by the committee, the advice given by the Partnership Projects Officer was that an RP wouldn't take on the affordable housing requirements of the site, primarily due to matters relating to being a flat scheme. So matters relating to management of shared spaces, etc. RPs are looking to have the freehold rather than leasehold interests, etc. So at that point in time, the options presented were for affordable housing on site to be provided by the developer themselves, for them to effectively serve as a private affordable housing landlord and to be subject to the same sort of nomination agreements that an RP would be subject to. However, since then, during the negotiations of the actual Section 106 agreement, further responses have come forward from the Partnership Project Officer, just saying actually in this circumstance, the preference would be for the affordable housing requirements to be paid by commuted sum, as opposed to the council enter into an agreement with a private landlord that they have not previously worked with before. So again, that's the matter that's in front of committee today, to seek approval of that change to those Section 106 heads of terms. Now, as set out in the report, the current calculation would generate a sum of £160,000. The Section 106 agreement, as it is being drafted, is based on a formula which is looking at the equivalent of 3 units on site, which was what was previously agreed by committee, which is a 20% affordable housing contribution. And that commuted sum would be payable prior to first occupation of the first dwelling on site. So again, the recommendation is that set out in the additional items paper, which just is to approve the application, is to authorise the Assistant Director to approve the application, subject to those conditions within the main report that were approved on the 22nd of July, and then subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the affordable housing requirements as a commuted sum in lieu of the on-site provision. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Do I have any questions? Does anybody wish to speak in the debate? Councillor Reid.
Well, I suppose I'm going to state the obvious. We'd rather like the affordable accommodation in Grantham, wouldn't we? We'd like it on the site. But in all honesty, we ain't going to get that. So we need to get our heads around the fact what we would do by approving the application. I don't think we have reasons or grounds to refuse it. We're all, I'm sure, conversant with the 20% affordable housing that is applicable to Grantham. Whilst the presentation's been made, I've sort of had a double check of everything that's there and rather wanted actually to pick something because just my heart tells my head this is not what I want. I can't find it. So on that basis, unless anybody has anything else to say, I will recommend it for approval.
Thank you. And Councillor Robbins. Would you like to say that you're second? Sorry.
Happy to second that.
Lovely. Does anybody else wish to speak on the matter? No, we'll go to the vote then as we have a proposer and a seconder. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Ooh. And that again is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for all coming and attending today, and thank you all the officers and support staff for helping us out today. Thank you, and I close the meeting at